Okay, so this is me with the lapel. And then this is just me yelling at you. Preference? Lapel, yelling. We're just trying to figure out the recording a little bit.
Lapel.
Lapel. All right, we're going to do lapel. And then the recording, you came in person, you get the premium experience anyway. So, hey, my name is Brooks. I'll go ahead and plug Remix Austin. We have our own little website. So, I run a little meetup if you just love going to meetups and need another one to go to. Our next one is on February 7th. And it's like just a couple blocks up at the Eastside Tech Hub, which is like HEB Favors headquarters. And it's the Remix meetup because that's what what's up. Am I not sharing?
Yeah.
Did it unshare?
Maybe.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, there we go. Is it good now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. I'm gonna be talking about Remix. I should also say that I'm the developer relations manager for the Remix team at Shopify. Throwing a lot of words here. So just to get started, I'm gonna ask who here has heard of Remix? Raise it, show of hands. Okay, so most of the room, if not all the room, is at least kind of familiar with Remix. That's cool. Who here is actually run or who's actually set up a Remix project and gooped around with it? Okay, way less of the room. Cool, that's great because this gives me a really good working place to work through. So I don't have I don't have any slides. What I'm planning on doing is just making this very interactive. I kind of have an idea of an app that I'd like to build and show you, and just kind of show you how Remix works. But the framework I kind of like to think about for Remix, which I will say, I'm not going to explain a ton of details about it, but I will say, just very briefly, in case you don't know, Remix is a framework built on React. So it's a React-specific framework, and it specifically is a server-side rendering framework, which we'll talk about what all those details mean. But that's kind of the main idea of what Remix is. So blanket statement, kind of where we're at. I titled the talk, and I'll just kind of go to the description because I don't even remember what I wrote. If I can find it, hold on. Austin.js. Well, there's that one. I like this one. Teaching young dogs new tricks, and that's kind of obviously very tongue-in-cheek because I'm a pretty young person, if you couldn't tell, and I learned web development. I started learning web development maybe 6 years ago, and as I have kind of gotten into, as I got to that more medium to senior engineer level, there were just a lot of things that I realized I wish were explained well to me from the beginning, and I'm sure we all have this experience, right? And you can never have it perfect, and there's all sorts of reasons. But I kind of learned web development when React was at the peak of it, or maybe the inflection point is maybe a better example. And there are a lot of things that were really cool that were being done with React at the time, but it kind of was missing in a lot of ways, us new developers, because we weren't learning all those kind of fundamentals of how the web actually works. And so we were just e.prevent default, on everything, and there's reasons to do that sometimes, and sometimes there's not. So that's kind of how I'm going to try and think about it. Is just in terms of, I feel like Remix, the way it's designed and built, is it's really trying to leverage the web platform in a lot of ways and then enhance that. And so by learning Remix, we like to say you accidentally learn the web. And so I'm just going to be pointing out a lot of things that I really like about how Remix has taught me kind of fundamentals of how the web works. That's the main idea. And then because Cloudflare is sponsoring, I'm also going to be using Cloudflare to kind of deploy an app and whatnot, just because it's super easy. Remix works on any node environment except for Bun, but that's their fault. Any node JavaScript environment, Remix will work on. So any sort of backend like Node or Deno or Cloudflare, all these, Remix is built so that it works very well on all of those. And it will work on Bun once Bun is node compatible, which is what they've said. That's why it doesn't work on that. So best place to start is with a nice old command line. So this is straight from the Cloudflare docs, right? Very, very simple. It's just going to be this, and I'm going to bump this one up a little bit. This little create Cloudflare CLI that they have. This is actually going to call Remix's CLI itself, and this is going to bootstrap a project for us, and we can kind of get going and see some things there. I will also say this is like a small enough room to where if you do have questions or if you're confused or if I went too fast over something, you can just like shout at me and that's totally cool. Or you can raise your hand and I'll try to notice you. And yeah, I'm very much for like a dialogue that makes it a lot easier for me to understand like what's making sense or what's not making sense. Because yeah, I have like a very general direction of where I want to go, but if we want to take rabbit trails, I more than welcome them. Cool. So first thing you do, right, is just to copy and paste things blindly into your terminal and hit enter. And so this is going to run through a bunch of things. So like I said, at this point, actually, it's running just Remix's CLI. So Cloudflare is just calling that one basically. Says, okay, do we want to do get repository, just all the normal things? Yes, we are going to need dependencies to do anything fun. You kind of need to install, you know, a million different NPM or node modules. And so while it's doing that, basically, yeah, what it's going to be setting up for us is kind of like a server environment, and then this kind of client that it has, and it's also going to ask us if we want to like go ahead and deploy this, which we'll go ahead and do just because it's cool. It's really cool how easy like Cloudflare makes it to deploy stuff. So once we get to that step, we'll show it. All right. Yep. It says, do you want to deploy an application? And so then it'll authenticate me, just make sure that I am authenticated. And then I've got 2 accounts here, so we'll do the first one. And just creating a pages project for me, deploying it. Telling me stuff to do.
Can you show us what parts of that CLI were remixed and what were Cloudflare?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just get it a little bigger. Is that good? Okay, so as soon as, we hit npm create Cloudflare at latest, blah, 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 then it said using Cloudflare. So this is Cloudflare, and then creating an application 1 step of 3. So this is all Cloudflare. And then it says continue with remix. So they actually called out there, and they're actually calling this command npx create remix. I'm not sure why they're doing at 2.4.1, like why that's stapled. That's fine. The latest version of remix is 2.5. It's just there's a couple of new features, I think, mostly unstable stuff anyway, so it's fine. So it's okay. So it's running that, and then they passed in the name my remix app, which is like the default. I'm sure we could have overridden that if we wanted. And then there's this -- template. So if you ever are wanting to play with remix with something like Dino or something else like that, or just anything, like maybe there's a like Quincy Dodds has his like stack, that epic stack or whatever that he's created that has all these opinions and stuff. So with the remix CLI, this -- template, you can just give it a URL to a it doesn't even have to be GitHub, but basically any repository, and it will automatically say, okay, cool, I'm going to create an entire like project out of that. So that's kind of how we do it. We try to actually keep our CLI very minimal. We used to have a lot of options. It's like, do you want TypeScript? Do you want this and stuff? And we just realized like we want to stop asking people a million things when you're just trying to get started. That's what the templates are for. So you can pass in whatever you want as you decide that you have opinions. And so then this is all just installing with remix stuff, and then back here when it says Cloudflare, step 2 of 3, that's back in Cloudflare. So yeah, great question. Thanks. Okay, it rudely interrupted us, but we have deployed to Cloudflare. So that was super easy, right? Cloudflare made that incredibly simple. Obviously, this is like not a super interesting page, but that's okay. Why would I want Cloudflare to decide a bunch of stuff for me? Like, this is great. So yeah, that was really easy. That deployed very, very simply for us. So yeah, we're going to just kind of build out on this. My idea was to create kind of a little bit of like I really like when meetups have their own websites. I think it's so cool. So I was going to make the ugliest version of this website that I possibly could. And so that's what we're going to be building essentially. So, not that one. So we're going to go into here. We'll CD into my remix app, which is just what I named it. We'll open that up. And please do let me know if you feel like, if you can't read anything or if you feel like the font's not big enough or anything like that, because I can change these things. Okay, so I'm going to copy in this README just to keep myself honest.
Out of curiosity, can we take a look at package.json and go over like some of the scripts in there?
No. Yeah, sure thing. That is a great idea.
I saw Regular in there, and I was curious what Cloudflare wanted to first start.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, just looking at, I mean, this is usually where I start and a new thing. So I love that idea to just look at the package.json. So, you've got kind of expected things, right? A build, which is calling a remix build. So that's going to probably build something or 2 things. And you've got a dev, which is, how you do anything interesting. We can go ahead and run that, right? And make sure that it's actually doing something interesting. So that's running something. We got a bunch of warnings that we're going to ignore. And yeah, okay, that looked like what we have deployed, so that's great. So dev does exactly what we expect. There's a lint, we never run that. And then start, so what start is going to do, I'm pretty sure this will fail immediately, but I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure this is like starting. Oh no, it actually did work. It did it. Yeah, it did. Okay. Maybe it did build. My understanding is, yeah, that's using Wrangler, which I don't know a ton about Wrangler, but I know it is it's emulating essentially the Cloudflare process, because Cloudflare is not, it's not Node, right? It's a different kind of environment. That's how it's so fast and all these kind of things. But anyway, so it's just like running Wrangler, running your app kind of locally, but the most production version of that app. That is my understanding of what the start command does for this. And I just deleted the README, but I'm sure the README had answers. Type checked, boring. And then npm run pages deploy should, oh, actually, I should change something, because otherwise that's going to not be very interesting. So we'll just say JS, and then delete all this stuff. And then let's go ahead and just run the command and make sure that it actually can deploy. Cool. We've got a little URL. Cool. All right. So Cloudflare, yeah, that's not Remix. That's Cloudflare being amazing. So yeah, super easy to deploy. This is why, Cloudflare is super fun. I was messing with it all day, and I'm just always amazed how easy it is to do stuff, and just deployed globally and all that stuff. Anyway, this is not about Cloudflare. So yeah, that's kind of what the package.json does, or has in it so far, which is great. I am actually going to copy over one more command though, because one thing that was always kind of okay, let's talk about, being a young developer wanting to do interesting stuff. I feel like building web apps it gets interesting once you actually have data. And I feel like the introduction of data is always really hard to a junior dev, because it's I don't know, data's kind of scary and hard, right? And you can't mess with it. And I don't know. I don't know the answer there yet, but to me, it's just more on-ramps to getting junior devs to just mess with data and feel okay about that, I think is a good thing. So the first thing we're going to do is just pull in data, because that's when stuff's fun. You can do things. So I'm just going to copy this command. Now I'm not going to go super into details of what I'm doing. I'll just say that I'm using D1, which is an open beta, I believe, product from Cloudflare. It's SQLite more or less, and when we're running it locally at 100%, it's just SQLite, and which is just a file-based relational database. And so this isn't a database talk, even though I just kind of got on a soapbox about data, so my bad. But yeah, this isn't a database conversation. Just saying that's kind of what we'll be using to be doing some simple stuff. So if I go ahead and run npm run db migrate, it should fail. Yep. So I think I just need to copy the Wrangler. Yeah, so let's copy this. Don't steal. Actually, I don't even think the ID matters at all. So you can steal it, I guess, if you want. So no, of course, hold on. No migrations present. Oh yeah, you also have to copy the migration file. That makes sense. Sorry, just boilerplate, of course. Yeah, like I said, I don't really want to teach all SQL, but here's SQL if you want to look at it later. Because I also don't know SQL, that's why I don't want to teach it. Cool, no migrations to apply. That seems incorrect. I swear. Oh yeah, I know it's wrong. Ignore this. This is all just boring details. Okay, cool. So we set up a database. We have a database now, and so that we can do interesting things. Yeah. So I just had to set that up so that we can show us some stuff. So I mentioned at the very beginning that that Remix is a full stack framework. So this is something that I really wish was explained well to me when I was a junior dev. SPAs were really exciting and cool in 2016 or 17 or whatever, and they still are. And a SPA is a single page app. The whole idea is that you can have an entire application, but it's really all just running on the client, and all the navigations are totally in the client. And that's really cool to talk about if you totally understand how MPAs work and the multi-page application works. But if you don't understand what any of that means, it's very confusing to a junior dev. And if you just say, here, just use create React app, and you just give them the SPA, then they don't know the power of the full multi-page application. And so that's very unfortunate. So I think that's something that that I think was done as a disservice, and I want to talk about a little bit. So I don't have like any good diagrams or anything, but hopefully, hopefully you know this, but if you don't, that's totally cool because this isn't always explained well. But basically with any application, even a spa, you always have a server and you always have a client, right? You have these two pieces, and your server serves things, right? It could just serve static files, but it always has to exist. And then your client is obviously like your browser or your phone's browser or whatever, and that's the thing you actually interact with. So Remix has both those pieces. Our server is Cloudflare, right, in this situation, and it's going to create some HTML and it's going to send that over the wire, and then the browser is going to pick it up and get to do things. And so we'll kind of see how is, where is Remix doing each of those pieces, because it kind of puts it all in one file so that it feels very seamless and like you're in this kind of one environment, but you always have those two environments. You kind of always have to think about that. And that was not explained well to me when I started. And I probably didn't explain it well then either, because it's, it takes getting used to and thinking about it. So, okay, so like I said, we have some data and we want to render some data. So we're going to try and start doing that. So here, I'm going to assume that everyone just kind of is somewhat familiar with React. Remix kind of presupposes that you know that. So first, let me talk about our routes very, very briefly. So there's this routes file, and then I have this underscore index.tsx file. The underscore is just, it's a convention for if you have your index route. Let me make up a new route because this is kind of confusing. So we're going to call this route, austin.js.tsx. And then we can export the default function. And you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter, but it does have to start with a capital because it's a default, which is whatever. So that's the thing. Okay, cool. We'll just say the exact same thing, but we'll change this name. And so now if I go to, not that one. Oh, wait, no, it was the first one. Yes. -js. We should probably run this, shouldn't we? So now if I go to the URL that I'm on /austin-js, we're going to see how, whatever I just typed in there. So this is file-based routing, right? This isn't something Remix came up with by any means at all. It's something actually, in fact, that I don't know, a lot of us on the team are actually very torn about. File-based routing is really nice at times, and then it's also very frustrating, but Remix has it. We also have ways that you can get out of that, but that's a conversation for another day. So that's how your routing works in Remix. You write a file, you export a default component, and you're good to go. It's like really easy to get going. The only kind of unique ones, well, not the only one. One unique one is the index. So just like the root of your application. Oh, goodness, what did I just click? It has to have a special like underscore in front of it. So it's underscore index, and that's the root. So we'll go ahead and delete this. Okay, so how can we do interesting things? Well, first thing you can already see is that you can export other things besides the default. You can export like a meta function, and that will return things like your title and your name and your contents, which you can see like new Remix app. So we could say like Austin.js, and then we'll see that the title changed right there in the little tab. If you can see it. I know it's kind of small. So there's all sorts of things you can do there, but one of the most interesting ones is actually getting data. So there's a, oops, sorry, a little lower. Okay, there we go. Export function loader. So if you export a function called loader, this is like a Remix special thing. This is your first entry point to saying I'm on the server. Kind of. We'll get back to that. But this is like your first entry point to saying I'm on the server. I want to do something on the server, and I'm going to send some data over to the client, and the client can do interesting things. So we can return, well, okay, that's fine. We'll just do whatever Copilot tells us to do. We'll return a message with hello world. And so as soon as we load this, let's just open our network to see what happens. So nothing super interesting happened really, actually. We just got a bunch of JavaScript and we got, our document. So nothing's really changed. So how do we actually access this data? Well, we use a little hook called use loader data. And then we can give it a type of loader, and this is just giving us TypeScript IntelliSense to tell us what we have available. And so we have a message, and it's going to be a string, excuse me. And then here we can go ahead and use some JSX and just render that. And so now we can see hi Austin.js, hello world. So it didn't actually, it didn't like make a fetch to that. It's just like embedded in there. So what's going on? Well, I kind of lied, right? Loader was not actually our first entry into the server. technically our first entry into the server was export default function index. So the way server-side rendering works, this is something that, yeah, again, was not explained very well, and this is how apps work for a really long time, like PHP, very good example of that, right, is you would render stuff on the server, you'd render HTML on the server, and then you send all this HTML over. Whereas like when I learned how to do development, they're just like, no, you just get this tiny index.html file, and then there's just this script, and then everything happens in the client. And I thought that was like kind of the way you had to do it. And there can be interesting things you can do that way, but it's actually really nice if you just give your user something immediately because you don't have a flag of content or anything like that. So the default function runs on the server. It runs the loader rather. It takes that data, it generates some HTML, and it sends it all to the client. And then once we're in the client, we can do, you know, like use state and use effect and all the kind of like client side stuff. So that's kind of the main bread and butter of what Remix is. So let's get some interesting data going. And here I'm going to cheat again and just copy some stuff over. So we'll copy this guy. So the only thing I'm really mainly going to point out here is I have some queries and I have some mutations. I just made these to do SQL that I didn't want to write in front of you guys. But I did name this db.server. The db part of that is not important. The .server is important. So this is a convention in Remix because as much as we would like to pretend that, you know, compilers and us, we're so smart that we can figure out exactly what should go to your client and what should stay on your server, we are not. We don't always know, and bundlers will mess up, and they sometimes will ship stuff to your client and sometimes include stuff from your client that's in your server. Including stuff that's going to the client in your server, not usually a big deal unless you're like running something like window dot blah, 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 blah. Shipping stuff from the server to the client is a very big deal because sometimes you have secrets in your server, right? You don't necessarily want everything that's in your server to go to your client. You also want your client to stay as small as it possibly can because that helps performance and all sorts of things. So Remix has this little convention of just .server that just explicitly says, never include this in the client. This is for the server. You can also do a db.client. That would be kind of weird. I don't know what your client DB is. I guess like index DB, whatever. You can do a blank .client, and then that's it. So you can do this at the file level, and you can also do it at the directory level like I've done here. So small little tangent there. So what are we going to do? We're going to first turn this into an async function, because that's also how you do fun things. And then we're going to get some stuff. So we'll say, oh, wait, we're not going to fetch. What was it? Get all events. Yeah. So I've got a little function where we get the events, and then this takes some things. The first thing it's going to take is a context. This is actually something that comes from the loader. So since we're using TypeScript, we'll just let it tell us a few things. So every time, every single loader has these loader function args. And if we open those up, we can see that it's a context, which is like anything in the world. Specifically for Cloudflare, they add some things like our DB connector and stuff like that. So we're going to rely on that. But then you also get params, which we'll come to later, and then also request. So this gets to another thing that I kind of wish that was taught to me when I was a younger developer. So the way that Remix works, and this is why it actually works really easily on Cloudflare as well as Dino, as well as like any JavaScript environment, is because it is built on top of like the request response model, which again, like this is seriously something I don't think I even really totally understood until like Remix was like, hey, this is just the way things should work. So I'm not going to go super into these, but basically this is just like, these are fundamentals of the web of how you send stuff and receive stuff and like headers and all these kind of things, all this stuff that I just like, I thought that you had to like install like, you know, Apollo query, and that's the only way you could interact with data, right? But no, apparently like there's this whole fundamental underside of all that called request and responses. So basically Remix is built on top of request response model. And so that's why basically we're saying we're using that standard. So as long as Cloudflare is using that standard or has some way to talk to that standard, then we're good. We can deploy on anything. We're not making up our own special rules. So another tangent. So we're not using the request though. We're using the context because Cloudflare has something special there. So we got some events.
I have a question.
Go for it.
You mentioned the code in db.server is only ever going to run server side. Some of the stuff inside this individual route is going to run server side. You didn't say exactly what, but you're talking a lot about the request response relationship. Where is if this is all running server side, where is the request and where is the response happening?
Yeah, so the request is happening. That's a great question. So when you, it's It's gonna be easier once we have multiple routes to show you this. So maybe I'll come back to that.
Okay.
That's a great question. And I will say explicitly, yeah, this is the one thing that still always, it's always tough because it's like we want the nice like DX of like a single file, but at the same time, I agree, it's like it can be confusing when you're first learning, like what is the server, what is not. Basically, the reality is it's like there's another function that's going to come up later called your action, and your loader and your action. Those are the two server ones, and your default is both, and then everything else is client. Pretty much. I'm probably wrong. But again, like that's like 90% of what you're doing in Remix. So when you're using the other things, you're probably going to be looking up anyway. So I'm not really that worried, even if I was wrong, because I would be looking up anyway. So as soon as you know those three, like you're golden in terms of Remix, like what is the client, what is the server? But yeah, it's a great question that you asked, and we're going to get back to that one. Okay, so yeah, I called this thing. It's going to give me some events, so now I can just return these events down. And by the way, this is just a shorthand of I'm just returning like an object from here. But this really does get turned into like a new response with a bunch of stuff. That's just like, it figures out what to do. There's also a little helper we have called JSON. And this is helpful because I can send down the events. And by the way, that JSON came from remix-run/react, just so you're aware of where that came from. And here you can also pass other things like your headers and your status. So this is a nice wrapper around a response as well. So this is really nice, especially if like, I'm not doing any area checking, but if I were doing area checking, I'd probably want to say like, oh, if this failed, what do I want to send back? I probably want to send back like a, it depends what they sent, but maybe like a 404 if it wasn't found, right? Or some other 400 or a 500 if I don't know what happened, all that kind of stuff. So, but in our case, we're doing the easy version. So we're just going to return events. So let's change this. And then let's change this to like, actually, I'm gonna want to nav. Let's see if it can figure it out. Cool. All right, so we're just gonna map over all the events I have. Each event has an ID, and then that'll give us an href that'll go to like an event / something ID, so we can go to individual pages, which will be interesting with an event name. So that's nice. I also know that in here there's an event.date, I believe. Yeah. So cool. Great, yeah, we can render stuff. That's really cool. And so far, yeah, this is all like, if I open this guy up, the whole preview, like that's all been rendered ahead of time on the server. So nothing has so far been client-side rendered. Everything has been server-side rendered, but we'll get to the more client-side. Oh, good.
I know this is like a remix talking about a Cloudflare talk, but
Go
you
for
said Cloudflare puts your DB connection inside of the context.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Can you pop open that DB dot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't even know what it's doing. Hold on. Yeah. So all that's not right. Sorry. Oh, it's in here, right? So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling off of context.environment. I'm pulling off this DB, and then you can like run these prepare statements and stuff. So again, this is where you need to look. Cloudflare D1 person. That wrong. Yeah. So basically, I just followed these instructions to get going with this. But yeah, this is all Cloudflare's D1. But yeah, I haven't like. Go for it. Yeah.
There's like a couple different data storage options on Cloudflare, and I don't work on the worker scene or anything like that, but I do work at Cloudflare. But basically, when you go to a worker or a page site, you can configure a binding to a data resource via your Pages application. And when you do that binding, you either do it via the Cloudflare dashboard or in the configuration file for your app. And by binding to that storage, you go back to add.
So it's essentially like for your durable object or any stores, it modifies the incoming request, drops something on there for you to use later on.
Yeah, as long as you have it bound. And then when he's running it locally, there are like local versions of that. So like local tab, anything you do to it will basically be on a flat file on the server, and then deploy it.
And this will work in the local.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. And it looks like it's some sort of like object, basically. Yeah, that they've got going. But yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. Cool. Good side tangent. Okay, cool. So we got some events, and yeah, we're just rendering them. And like I was saying, so far we haven't done any client-side rendering really. We've done hydration, but I don't think that most junior dev needs to know what hydration is, but it is good to understand what that is as well. Just a little more. Okay, so let's do something else interesting, right? And also learn something else that I wish was explained to me. So when I first made my first apps, because I was just using Create React App, I didn't really realize that like when you go to a really dumb website, when you go to this website and you click on someone like all this stuff in the URL changes is crazy, right? I thought that was all so arbitrary, right? And you can even download these great extensions that will just remove anything with a question mark after it. And isn't it so great because it cleans up the URL? Because the URL is just like, it's just there to be ugly, right? I'm obviously being very facetious, but I genuinely had no idea the URL was like actually really useful and that I should be using it. So we are going to use it though. So this already Copilot kind of told me what we're going to do, and you probably can't see it, but in the bottom it's like, we're going to go to events/1. One is an ID that came from the database. So that's how we're going to use it. We're going to use the URL to tell us enough information to know what we should fetch. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to change this to be called events, just to make this a little easier, and we're going to do some more stuff later. So we're now on events. We'll fix the index issue later, because if we go back to index, it doesn't render anything, which isn't good. So we'll fix that later. We're going to go to events, or sorry, we're going to create an events. Now we don't want to make events.1, because then we'd have to make events.2, and we have to make every single version. So we're going to use a param, which is like, like an argument or whatever. And Remix's convention is just $name. The name could be whatever. I'm going to call it ID because it's an ID in this situation. And then here we can export a default function called event. Yes. Yeah, seems good. Okay, and so then when we click one, click 9, nothing happens, which I think was expected. Say it one more time. Yes, we will get to that. I realized, I think I know what I did wrong. Yeah, I do know what I did wrong. So actually, okay, I'm going to undo this part because I wasn't ready to talk about that yet. Yeah, okay, it's an event. So we got that, but you're right. We want to actually like get the specific event. Is that what you're saying? Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. So how do we get that specific event? We can use, there's a use, I think it's use params that we can use. So we want to do it inside of the actual component, but I want to fetch more data. I have more information to tell you about this great event I'm going to be speaking at tonight. And so I'm going to fetch that inside of a load. So we're going to export a function loader. And like I said, it's only fun if you put async on it. And so here we're going to say event, I think, equals get event. And then this should probably take another context. That's just kind of the standard I've made. It's nothing special to Remix. I don't care about the types. And then I think we need to pass in an ID, right? Because we don't know what event this is without passing the ID in. So how do we get that ID? Well, I kind of mentioned it here earlier. Okay, I do need the type, sorry. I should actually know what these are called by now. Loader, function args, yeah. So there's a params. It's a params like argument that gets passed in. So that's your params. And so we can get the ID here. Call it just ID. And then I actually don't think it's that way. I think it's this way. Ooh, we'll see. And then just to make it happy, we're just going to do this. Not TypeScript's not matters. All right, cool. So we'll just return the event. And then here we can say yeah, okay. But something's wrong.
JSON.
What did I do wrong? I'm hearing two things. What? I don't know. Probably. Man, twice in a row. All right, yeah, so that figured that one out. I don't know why this one is upset though. Expected 0 arguments, you got 1. 1 what? It's this. It's coming from React Router. Yeah, you're right. So, okay, gripe about Remix. Remix has way too many packages right now. I will be the first to admit it. We have way too much. We're trying to fix that. We want just like one Remix package for pretty much everything. So sorry about that. If you run into that, make sure you're importing from the right package. Should be remix run /react. The reason that comes from React Router, or rather there is that version of React Router, is I probably should have said this, but Remix is built on React Router. It's actually built by the same people who created React Router. React Router actually looks a lot like Remix. It's just more like Remix Spa, which is now a thing. So that's kind of confusing to even say that. But yeah, that's more or less how why that confusion happened. So thanks for the catch. All right, so now we have our event, and our event has lots of information. So let's just render like the event dot name. And then we can see, yay, Remix teaching young dogs new tricks. So that exists, which is good. And then let's add like a little link so we can go backwards. And we'll say, hey, and we'll say, go back. Okay, so now we can go back and, yep, okay, that was just the server, yep. And now we can switch between them and we're actually rendering some specific data, which is nice, okay, that's cool. But if you'll notice, we actually are in the multi-page application world right now. So every single time I go to a new page, it's actually reaching to the server and completely server rendering everything and sending me that entire thing. And you can see in the top left corner, you know, my little spinny spins there. So yeah, by default, this is actually how the web works. I did not know this because this was just assumed information when I learned how to do development, which is fine. This is actually a really good, can be a really good way to build applications. Lots of websites are built this way, and they work pretty well. But there's limitations. It can be a little bit slower. You don't get nice animations. There's all sorts of things, right? So let's enhance this. Let's make this a little bit better to where we are going to do our SPA, our client-side transitions, which means that we're going to pretend like we're transitioning. I mean, we really are. We're going to update the URL and we're going to update the UI and everything. So this is pretty easy in Remix. The way that you do this is you change this from an A to a link. And the link comes from @remix-run/react. And then this one you change back to a link. And then this is not an href, it's a 2, and there's a reason for that. And it's buried in comments somewhere, but I don't remember off the top of my head why that is. Let's also delete that. And then we'll change this back to a link. And then I think this will answer the question that was asked earlier. Cool. All right, so if I click it, watch the spinny or the refresh button. So it didn't refresh, it just immediately showed up and changed. And again, to answer, so if I refresh, what you can see happens is we get the entire document, get a bunch of JavaScript. I'm going to clear all that out. And when I click this button, what happened? Well, I got a JSON request actually, or I got a fetch request to get some JSON. So that did go back to the server and it got some information, but it just ran the loader and gave me information from the loader, and the client ended up doing the rendering. So as soon as we're all the way on the client, we are like, hey, it's client time. You're going to do all the work in terms of the rendering and everything. We can opt out of this if we want. You can turn JavaScript off and Remix very easily. I believe you just do that in the root, and you just, yeah, if you just like delete this.
So you can turn JavaScript off.
Yeah, you can turn, yeah, exactly, yes. No, yeah, straight up like not using scripts, at least not using Remix scripts on the client. So like I said, in root.tsx, I just commented out this scripts component, and now all these are full page reload transitions now at this point. And you can decide, oh my gosh, I got a lot of questions. Go for it.
Might be a question for later on.
Sure.
The JavaScript that it does run on the front end, does it execute it on the main thread or in a worker?
It's all the main thread unless you decide that you want to run something in a worker. Like by default, we're not trying to do any worker magic or anything. So it's all the main thread.
Are all the routes loaded lazily, or are they part of the main bundle when you do it SPA like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of the, I'm trying to remember, all the JavaScript for the routes, or what specifically are you asking actually?
Just like all the JavaScript, like all the React code that's actually going to render the route out.
Yeah, no, okay, so that's a great question. Yeah, so it automatically code splits. So no, you only get the JavaScript for the specific page that you're on. There are ways to opt into optimistically rendering stuff and prefetching. There's actually, if you're not subscribed to the Remix YouTube plug, Ryan Florence actually has some really, really great explained videos, and he's going to have really, really good videos all about this coming out in the next few days about prefetching and all these data fetching strategies. So I definitely recommend, even if you don't use Remix, it's really it was helpful to me to understand some of the stuff. So no, you get a big manifest, and that tells us everything about like how everything's connected. So we get this one like graph of like how everything is connected. Even that we're trying to optimize. But as far as the JavaScript, no, you just get for what is on the specific page that you're on. Then when you go to a new route, you'll get that. Same with the data. You don't get the data for a route you're not already on. You just get the data for the route you're on. Good question. So yeah, automatic code splitting. You can code split further too. There are ways. I mean, React has ways to do that with it. Okay, how long do I have? When do I need to be done again? Okay, all right, cool, sweet. Because I had other things to talk about. Sweet. All right. Cool. So let's talk about. Do y'all want to talk about nested routing, or do you want to talk about forms?
I was gonna ask how you have multiple path frames.
All right, we're gonna talk about multiple path params. I might have to make up something for that. We'll talk about nested routing and see if it gets anything interesting, and then if you want to lead it in another way, that's cool too. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do what I was trying to do earlier. We're going to turn this into events. This is going to break. Well, the first reason that broke is because I'm not on /events, right? So Remix has a really easy way to fix this. Again, this is just a fundamental, and the web, apparently you can just redirect. You can just like be like, if something comes to a resource, you can be like, go somewhere else. Didn't know that. So that's very cool. So we're going to recreate that _index file. And then we're going to export we're just going to export a loader, actually. We don't even need it to be async, so we're not doing anything fun. And we're going to return a redirect function. This one comes from Cloudflare because it's doing some wrapping around what's going on. But this is just going to return a 302, one of those response, and it's going to redirect. And I'm going to redirect to events. So if we go to the home page, it just automatically redirects to events. This is just a way to. This happens a lot. Like if you're often to get it into like a SaaS application, you might try to go to the root, right? And then it like shoots you over to a dashboard or whatever. That's all that's happening, right? So it's the same kind of strategy. So Remix made that really easy. We just had to export that loader. Okay, so now we're in events, and it's showing all of our events, which is good. But if I click onto an individual one, it's still showing me all of my events. And this is where nested routing comes in. So because I have an events and I have an events.id, Remix is saying these are all like, this is all the same thing, right? We're all in the events /something. But it's not rendering that /something. And that's because by default, Remix really tries to give you kind of the control to decide how everything lays out. Because it's like, I don't know how you want this part of events to lay out and then the child of events to lay out. So it gives us this function, not a function, a component, which is a function called outlet. And so wherever you render an outlet, whatever the child of that route is, will render here. Did that make sense? I feel like, well, okay, wow, y'all understood it. That was way faster than I understood that, so that's great. So we've got just the root, just renders this. If we wanted something else to render at the root, actually, let's do that. So we can create a new file called events.index.tsx. And so here we can say export default function events index, and we'll return, we'll say like, select an event. Cool. So if we're on events /nothing, it says select an event. And then as soon as we actually go to like events / something with that dynamic, or that param, then it starts rendering whatever was in the param. So that's nice.
What does it go back to in this case?
It probably, actually, it's a great question. I'm pretty sure what it's going to do is, yeah, it tried to go back, but then it got redirected back. So it just like went back and forth. And I think you can probably see that a little bit better in here even. So let's try it one more time. So yeah, it did a GET request to 204, no content, and then that actually sent that loader, which sent us back, basically. So yeah. So it's a pretty silly link at this point, right? But it worked. Okay, wait, what was the question you had about multiple frames?
I was curious, in the way that you're defining a path param is in the file type, in the file name itself. So I was curious how you then add another URL param. Are you able to have multiple on the same path?
Yeah, do you want like one after like the 6 in this case, or do you want?
Yes.
Okay, sure, yeah. And then this one, oh, TS. No, wait, that's right. Why is the symbol a little bit different? Oh, well. Default function. Did I do something wrong? Oh, because of, yeah, that's a terrible name. Thank you. Hmm. All right. And then we'll return, yeah. Oh man, you almost had it. Come on, give it back to me. All right, there we go. Okay, and so then if we give, so right now it's not rendering anything, but it's because we have to render another outlet. So we always have control over if and when. And the reason that's really nice is because it's like, maybe we want to animate that in, maybe we want to do something pretty like that. I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons. But yeah, so now if we just throw an outlet in, then it'll say outlet not defined, which is fair. I didn't define it. Cool. And it says something, and we can actually render a million of these if you really want to for some reason, and then we just got all those children. So yeah, that's basically how you would do it. Cool. Any questions on nested routing? Oh, okay.
Maybe not necessarily, but like, so the parameter, what type does it have? Like just a or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is silly. Why did I make all these? Let's get rid of those. And where was that actually? Was the params here? The params, I believe it's just like, yeah, params string. It knows these are, it's either string or undefined because that's really all we can tell you about this thing. So it's really up to you to make sure that that was right. We don't, well, yeah, we don't have any sort of like extra magical like type intelligence kind of stuff on that. That's something that's talked about. I'm trying to add something like that. It's pretty low on a priority list, but it would be cool if it could be like, oh, I already know you're on this file. Like, this is what's give you. But yeah, so.
You said there's no fancy type stuff, but when you hover over params, the generic type, which makes me think there is fancy stuff happening.
Yeah, so I don't, that's actually, I have no idea. Why do we do that? It doesn't look that fancy to me. I don't know.
It's always strict.
It's always finger. I did not write the params, or sorry, the type. So yeah, not 100% sure. Maybe we want the option to make it more fancy. That's a very fair point. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Yes,
Yes.
so I was gonna ask, like, let's say you had another one that was like a Ben's ID, something else, VFX.
Yeah.
You could have multiple outlets on the page. How do you say which one goes where, or is that like a invalid thing?
Yeah. Like, so if I had like the same thing, but
Just something different.
yeah. So the way that the algorithm is going to work, basically, it's pretty simple. It just does a specificity. So if I went to slash something else, it's like that slash something else. So I'm going to render this one. So it does whatever it matches. And as soon as it's like, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah,
I see.
you got it. Cool. Great question.
Events.id have to exist for events.id to have something.
No. It just, if you're in events slash like one, then it's just going to render whatever events had. So yeah, no, you can do it as many times as you want. You can also have optional params. That's another thing you can have. Good.
You have two outlets of page, and then one of them render one nested route and the other one completely different route.
Yeah, kind of. It's a good question. So what you can do is you could know, because basically your outlet is always going to render whatever matches the URL. So you don't need to tell the outlet to render this or that, but you may be like, oh, when it matches this URL, I want you to have like this layout versus this layout. And so you could do some matching there. You always have, you can use location. That's a hook you have. So you have the full power of that to do whatever you want. But as much as possible, every time I've seen people like try to like, they're trying to do something like that, usually the answer is like, just put it in the child and originally anyway, and you're probably already like golden. Because the more like you have this indirect logic of like, oh, well, in the parent it does this, and then the child it does this. To me, it gets a little confusing, but I'm sure there are very legitimate use cases. Okay, no more questions, because I thought of something that I want to talk about, which is going to be cool. So yeah, we got this. Let's delete this. We don't need this part anymore. Yeah, I did want to talk about something with nested routing that we get that is very neat and very helpful. So nested routing isn't just for layouts. That's one really big piece of it, but it's actually for data loading strategies. So it makes it really nice to load the right data at the right time. So if I refresh this, we got 6, right? Which is our document name, great document name. And it sent everything to us, right? And as soon as, I'm gonna clear all this, as soon as I want to go to a new page, it's gonna fetch more data, right? And what did it actually fetch? It fetched all the data for the rise of structured concurrency. which I think I came to that one. It was very interesting. Excuse me. What it didn't fetch though is it didn't fetch all of this data. The reason is because we already fetched that data and we know that that data didn't change. So with your nested route, it's kind of confusing here because I'm doing it like top bottom, but imagine it left to right. So with your nested data, it's only going to change basically based on the URL. It knows, okay, events did not change, but for changed. So I need to fetch that data. Don't need to go ahead and refetch events because events is probably good. If we stopped into this, you can fetch it, but by default, that's how Remix thinks, is it says, whatever changed in the URL, that's how I'm going to determine what should be loading or not. So you only load the data that you actually need for the page transitions, which is really nice. So, okay, now any more questions about nested loading or nested routing and loading?
Have you ever seen interesting use cases with nested routing for purely like backend solutions, just loaders and actions?
That's a good
We were
question.
talking about it before the meetup, and like I was thinking maybe there's something there.
Yeah, I
Curious
think.
if you've seen something in the community.
I mean, okay, so the way, yeah, I'm sure you could do something interesting in the sense of like, yeah, because that's a good question. Basically, what's going to happen is, well, it's also confusing because sorry, we're trying to work on like a single fetch, and right now the 3 fetches. I don't know of anything. Let me just answer it that way. I'm not going to come up with something on the fly. But yeah, it's interesting if you find out anything. Really easy to reach out. So another question, another hand.
When you do the client-side routing without disabling the script, is it always gonna hydrate the client side, or is there any way you can set a flag on a component that it doesn't?
It's always, okay, yeah, it's a good question. So it is always going to hydrate the entire client. There's not a way to tell a specific component to not hydrate, not until we add our version of RSC, which will come eventually, because that is the way that like up until that React had no way of doing that. What you can do though is you can individually on a route, you can say like, don't hydrate this route. So you could do that at a route level, could work. So, and the way to do that is basically to use like, there's an extra little function and you can export, or not a function, I think it's called handle. And this is just like the catch-all. This should be a constant. That might be wrong. I think it's called handle. Anyway, you can just pass whatever you want in this, and then your root route can read it. And so you would just dynamically say, if like you want to say like Node.js or whatever, is true, then you just have in your root route this logic that says like, if that's true, don't render the scripts. And so yeah, on a page per page. So your about page, you could be like, I don't want to hydrate the about page. No one's interacting with JavaScript. That's about the best we can do right now. We don't like that fully because we do want it to be at like the component level. But again, you kind of have to have the fullness of RSC to be able to do that. As far as I understand, if someone knows another way to do that, let me know. Okay. Y'all want to talk about forms? Forms are fun. Mutations, right? Changing data. That's the only way to have fun with data. You can't just read it all day. Okay, I'm gonna have to do a little bit more just like boilerplate setup stuff because there's just too much stuff to set up. So I'm gonna delete the routes here, and then I'm gonna grab these routes. We're getting all my hotkeys. Okay, so we got it. That all looks the same. This one is the new one. I don't know what this is. Where did this guy come from? I guess that's an example. Okay. All right, close your eyes. All right. You can open them now. Okay. I think I set everything up right. All right, isn't that so much prettier? Guys, don't have to look at my ugly code that I had before. Now you can look at this beautiful code. All right, so we've got kind of the same thing. On the left-hand side, we've got our navigation. On the right-hand side, it's just rendering stuff. And again, it's still doing that nested layout kind of stuff. So when I click this, it's just getting the data for the specific person. I guess actually we'll show one thing because it's just so easy and fun. So with these links, if you just add like this one little thing, prefetch, and if you add prefetch intent, what this is going to do is this is going to automatically, whenever I like hover over these, oh, it didn't work. So sad. No, because I did it on the wrong one. That's my fault. Prefetch equals intent. Someone already understood what it was going to do, and they were already amazed, which I love. Okay, so as soon as I hover over any of these, it's going to go ahead and fetch the data for like the next page, which is really nice and make it very quick. The only thing it's not fetching is like the image itself. It's pretty easy to add that, but I'm not going to go over that because Ryan is about to make a video. It's way better than that. So anyway, that was just too fun not to show that little trick up our sleeve. Okay, so but no, we want to create a new event, right? So we want to mutate data. We want to add data. That's how you have fun. First thing I'll say is like we're at event/new, yet everything just disappeared. Why in the world did that happen? I thought we were using nested layouts. This is another like little trick in Remix. I do not like this convention, but it is what we have. So if you do like events underscore something, then it like takes you out of the layout. Anyway, we're gonna make a nice like cheat sheet that explains all this stuff. But it's on the docs.
But if you might go and put the dot before the underscore right there, is it gonna just break and you're gonna be searching for that typo?
That's a great question. I'm pretty sure what it's gonna do is this definitely, yeah, that's not a thing, but I think it's just gonna be this. No, it's not. That is a thing. So I don't even know what that is. It's too many underscores. So, and again, my entire team, I'm pretty sure doesn't like file-based routing, but it's what we have and people do like it. So. Is also we do have a config option. Like you can make your entire own. If you come up with the perfect file-based routing solution, I will give you a lot of kudos. And I really happy. And you can make it. No, but you can make it. There's like in the remix.config, which is going to go away, but whatever. There's a way to like add routes, and you can do all this like definition of them and stuff. And several people have made their own kind of routing convention. So if you don't like this one, please make a better one, and I'll get Michael to sponsor you, my boss, on GitHub. Okay, what are we doing? I'm making a form. So there's another thing I wish was explained to me when I was a new developer. I thought you had to use like Apollo query to do any sort of mutations. I thought that like you had to, like I knew it used fetch underneath the hood, right? But I thought that you had to use some sort of like fetch API. I didn't realize that like the anachronistic MDN, form. I didn't realize, no, that's not it, sorry. MDN form element, there we go, that'll make it better. I didn't realize that this thing actually is so useful. I thought this was like a relic of the 90s, right? That's how you like, I just didn't think this was a thing you used. Everything I saw did not use forms. And you're probably all laughing because you probably all know this, and that's amazing. But I promise you, this took me many years to learn that this is actually okay. And the funny thing is, like, before I joined the Remix team, when they actually talked about this and they talked about how they were going to use forms as a fundamental building block for mutations, they literally had people be like, you can't build a web app with forms, which is just a very amazing statement because it's like, how did all the web apps get built in the first place? And also kind of validating that like React is starting to really lean into forms with like server actions and all these kind of cool things that are coming out that like Remix is now having to play a little bit of catch up on. So forms, they're cool, they're neat. So we can just use forms. When you submit a form, it automatically posts, or actually I think it automatically gets, but regardless, it automatically does something to the server, sends a request. You can opt out of that. So let's make one. We'll make it form. And so we'll have like an input. For now, we'll just do like a name, I think. Actually, sorry, we should do a label. Name and then input. Also, fun fact, if you didn't know this, you don't have to do HTML4 for the label to connect it to the input. If you put the input inside the label, it's the best for demos like this, not for like real like circumstances. Type is going to be text, and then the name is just going to be name, which is a little bit confusing, but just go with it. And then the button. We'll submit. And then I can never remember the rules, so I'm just gonna say type submit. Sometimes it automatically is, sometimes it isn't. Doesn't matter, just be explicit. Okay, so we got a little name, and we got a submit button. Let's add some terrible styles. Say display flex. And then flex direction. Nope. Column. Come on, there we go. Oh my gosh, beautiful. Okay, one more, I'm sorry. Okay, that's perfect, right? Okay, so what happens if I do that, right? So it did a GET request. which means that it serialized it all in the URL params, and that's why I have question mark name equals Brooks, right? That by default is what a form does. Sometimes that's what you want, like a search, bar. A lot of times you do put those in query params, and so that's actually a really great case for a form with a get param. But in this case, we don't want to do that, so we're going to do form, and then we'll do go away method equals post. And I don't know if it's supposed to be like capitalized or not. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just normalize it at some point. Okay, so now if I do this, who knows what's going to happen? Okay, 405 method not allowed. So this is by default. Remix is just saying, hey, you didn't provide anything. This method isn't allowed. We can make this look prettier. We can change what that looks like. In fact, we are going to. But by default, if you try to post to a route that doesn't handle that, then that's going to happen. Some people complain that this is like an ugly default, but it's like, what do you want to be serving to people who are like posting to random endpoints? I don't know. If people are doing that, they don't deserve pretty things, is my opinion. It's like, what are you doing? So anyway, so we're going to export a function called action. I mentioned this earlier. Man, every time. All right, async action, and then it's going to have some things, action, function, args. We'll get those out. So this actually has very similar things. We have the context. Actually, it's the same. Sorry, context, params, and requests. It's the exact same things. The request in this case will be whatever came from the form. So here we can return things from this. We can say like, okay, true. And here I'll just like console log use router, use action data. We'll just do that for fun at the moment. So yeah, let's just see what happens. Okay. So what did happen? Okay, I got some consoles where it said, okay, true. So I got some data, some things happened. It did do a full refresh, you might have noticed. Let me do it again. So it does refresh the whole page. So by default, this is the MPA world, right? We're back in the multi-page application world. And this is how forms work in that case. But Remix created capital F form. And this enhances it to where we're now back in SPA world. So I did that, and I got a bunch of undefined because there's a bunch of rendering stuff happening. But again, you can see it didn't like refresh the entire page. So it did a client side. But now that's kind of a worse experience because it's like what happened. So anyway, there's a lot of work that you have to do to kind of clean this up. But that's kind of the idea of what the form is. So in the interest of time and the interest of giving you all more questions, I'm going to do more copy pasting just to show you kind of what the end result of this looks like. So we'll get back to this one. And I'll more talk through the code at this point. Let's see if it works. Okay, so it's all there, which is cool. Yeah, perfect. So a couple things. So we've got this form, right? We'll say like new some JS event, and then it's gonna be great. Cloudflare. There we go. I think I spelled that right. And then we'll say, next month. And here we actually have a list of different speakers who have spoken last time. We probably should create a form to where you can actually add a new speaker, unless we're just going to keep recycling these people, but that's fine. And then we have a little form that lets us know who our sponsors is, but of course there's no other sponsor but Cloudflare, so that's the only one. So how is this all working? First, on our loader, we're just getting the sponsors and the speakers, and we're sending them down. So that's how we have that data for the select. And then I'm gonna skip the action because that's where the fun stuff happens. Then I'm just rendering stuff, right? This is just a form like I talked about. And it's got each of these inputs, which is everything that I just filled out, and this select and options. I'm just using raw HTML here. I'm not doing like any crazy JavaScript client-side stuff. You can definitely do that stuff, and you probably should the more complicated your form gets. But for now, that's really all we have. So as soon as I hit submit on this, it's gonna send a post request. And that post request is just gonna be form data. And this form data, this is another thing, if you go to the MDN reference, this is just stuff that the browser gives you for free, basically. Like this is just stuff that, and in this case, of course, it's the server. But this is just like the basics of how you can interact with the form. So we can get more sophisticated. We can bring in Zod and do some validation. We probably should eventually, right? But at the base level, Remix is just trying to lean on how the browser actually works. Of course, ignore all my typecasting, sorry. And so once we get the name, description, all these different things, again, we should check that this all exists and that's all in the right format and everything. And you really should do that on the server. That's kind of the power of having it into action here. Then we just create the event. And as soon as we have created the event, we'll get an ID back. and we can just go to the event that we just immediately created. So let's see if that actually works. Yay, new Austin.js event with Charles Lau. So that is how mutations and remix work. It's all built around the form and just an enhanced form and just using form data, which is really cool from someone who spent a lot of time doing just crazy hook magic to try and do everything, which you can do really cool stuff with. But anyway, I think it's cool too.
I have multiple actions on the page.
Yes, right now the way to do it, debates about if people like this or not, but I think it's kind of fun. So, hey, I already knew. So you can add something called a hidden input. I didn't realize this thing, right? Type hidden just means that this is not going to be seen, but it holds some value. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll call the name intent, and then they'll say like, I don't know, action 1. And then inside of here, you'll pull that off. So you say like const intent equals form data.get intent. And then you could do like a switch statement or whatever you want to do. Some people are like, oh, why can't you just give me like multiple actions with named actions? Maybe that's something we'll do someday. I don't know. But honestly, this works. And for the most part, we recommend like all this data you probably should be throwing into another file anyway, would be my opinion. So you can more easily like unit test it and all that kind of stuff. So you probably don't want to keep this all in the, so as soon as you get to the place where it's like, okay, even if you have 5 actions on a single form, but if it's really just a switch statement with like, or if statements with like each of the intent, and then you're calling a single function, I feel like that's pretty readable personally. So that is the kind of recommended way. And again, that's absolutely 100% not a remix thing at all. Like we didn't admit any of that.
It's mentioned unit test. I think that, React I didn't see a test action created.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the same way you would do to everything, basically. So yes, you're right that our default template does not include testing. We really, really try to avoid just throwing like a bunch of opinions that we just have to keep kind of updated. So yeah, we don't put a testing suite in there, but a lot of the templates. So like, I will say, if you really want to get into Remix, I would look into either the Indie stack or the Epic stack, which is Kint's again. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this one. So these stacks, this is a much more like, how do I say it? The idea of the stacks is basically they are like a bunch of technology and opinions to say like, hey, this is how you actually build like a semi-realistic thing with Remix. So like deployment, SQLite database, all those kind of things. But then down here, you'll see like end-to-end testing with Cypress is how this one is set up, and unit testing and stuff like that. I am currently, this isn't 100% perfect yet, but I'm trying to create these resource pages to give you a lot more of stuff like this, make it more searchable. This is like, again, sorry, this isn't perfect, but if you go to the templates version of it, you can see, hey, these are a lot of templates we like, and this is a really good place to look for like inspiration or even just how to set it up. Because we don't want people to have to like rely on a CLI to set everything up for them, but we do want to make it easy when you know what you want. But anyway, I would go into these honestly and see like, how does Ken set up his Jest suite? You know, how's he doing that? Actually, I think he uses Vite test. How does he set up his Vite test suite? And then you can, you know, just kind of copy that in. So yeah, the only thing that I said all that, and then there's one caveat. I believe the only thing we have that's specifically about testing. Oh, we do have no, this is all about contributing. Oh man, I don't remember what it's called. We have like a remix. It's like a remix test package that specifically is about like, I think it stubs out like your actions and your loaders. I honestly, don't know a ton about it because I've never actually used it myself. Just the nature of like my job, but it is something been meaning to learn a little bit more about. So that's, I think, the only like specific remix testing thing we have. More questions?
Was there magic happening or?
There was, yeah. Are you saying how it like specifically went to events/7? Yep. Yeah, it's a good question. Let me run through it again, but I'll cut to the chase and say it's because we.
I guess I also was curious about the capital form. I'm assuming that's a component that comes from Unix.
Yes.
And has maybe something built into it. I was mostly asking like you posted an event. I'm assuming that on the back end they went to a database into D1
Yep.
And then it was immediately available on the root route for that in the client without you having to, or maybe at this when you were actually.
Yeah. That's a great question. So line 35 at the end, after we've awaited the creation of this event, we have the ID and I actually just return a redirect. So if you ever return a redirect function, that will automatically do that. So that's what I already knew that it was built at that point. So then I just said, go to this page. And so then as soon as I went to that page, it then refetched that data. Should have said this also. I always forget that this is not necessarily obvious. Whenever you submit an action, all the loaders are automatically invalidated. So that's the other thing that it immediately happened. That's actually, thank you for pointing that out because that's not clear. So yes, as soon as the action finished, it reloaded the entire, everything basically. It did do a navigation, so it's a little bit like kind of did it both. It would have done either way. But yeah, so it automatically threw this redirect. So it said, okay, I'm going to go to this page and now I'm just going to render everything. That data was already populated. I knew that because I didn't send the redirect until it was. And so then it just said, okay, I'm going to fetch that. I'm going to render everything again. I can run through it again if it'd be helpful, like on the actual net. Yeah. Yeah, and let me actually, yeah, to show that even better, let me get rid of the little underscore I'm doing here so we can actually see the sidebar now. And I'll bump it up. Oh, that's not a bumping. There we go. Okay, so now we got the sidebar, right? Put the network up. And then we're going to create another one. Doesn't matter. Okay, and so as soon as I create this, let me also bump this one. So it's going to do a couple things. So the first thing, or one thing we're going to see is on the left-hand side, there's going to become something that kind of comes in. This is going to change, and then this whole thing is going to update all at the same time. And then in the request, what we see is the image because the image loaded. We see this data. That was the fetch, I believe, that we sent. If I'm remembering right, yeah. So this is the data we actually sent over. Then this is the data that Remix brought back to us. And I'm trying to remember why. Yeah, I don't know why it gave us 7 though. That's interesting. I'm sure something's going on there. But yeah, then it gave us this, which is the navigation. So once it went to 8, it got us that data. That's just the image. Yeah. So then it got us all that and then it rendered it. Yeah. And it did already have, it would have, if we had not already been on the JavaScript on this page, it would have also downloaded the JavaScript, but it already had that. So it didn't rerun that because we already had that data. Is that kind of, I know it's like, I don't know, it takes work, I feel like, to think in the remixy way, but yeah, that's basically what's going on.
Is there any way to programmatically invoke an action, or do you have to do it through like a form submission?
No, yeah, there you totally can. And actually, honestly, we honestly don't kind of recommend that you use this form specifically all the time. While it's actually really great for like single pages like this, for the most part, you're going to be wanting to use, where are we? Use fetcher. And actually, I think we're saying use navigate, which now I'm giving you way too many things. No, it's not that one. We'll just talk about use fetcher because that's easier. So use fetcher is like a hook form of this. So basically what you get back is you get a fetcher, which is like this object and has a bunch of stuff on it. But one thing it does have on it that's really helpful, if I can find an example of it. Too many things. Oh, come on, fetcher.form. It does have a capital F form component on it. And I'm embarrassed because I can't even find it. I think I'm just on the wrong page. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, let's look at this one. This will be better. Okay, so we actually recommend using this one. And the reason is because there's a lot of reasons I don't really want to go into. But yeah, so you've got this one, that's a form, but also you can do just like a fetcher.submit if you want to. So that's the more like imperative non-form way to do it, which there's very valid reasons you would do this, like, I don't know, modals are a good example when this kind of comes up and things you want to do in the background, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, we definitely have those APIs. Yeah, I'm going to plug this one. Yeah, these singles, this playlist called Remix Singles Trellix that Ryan created kind of walks through how you would build, like, he built basically a Trello clone, which is pretty cool, and like walks through all the different ways you would do, like, you use these kind of fundamentals, everything I've talked about, and a couple little other things, but to build essentially like, yeah, a Trello clone. Another thing that Remix does that I didn't even show is like, if you submit multiple form submissions, they'll like automatically cancel the revalidation or like the loading and of other things. So there's a lot of like extra cancellation and all this kind of extra stuff that goes on. But that's like whole just like, again, I mean, this dude made like 16 videos walking through all this stuff, and it wasn't even like down to the details, pretty high level. So
Is there opinionated way of doing form validations, like shared validation on client server?
yeah, Remix does not hold an opinion of how you should do this. The ones I've seen that people seem to really like, people really like Zod. I'm a little iffy on Zod, partly because it's kind of a ramp up to understand it. I feel like the syntax is weird, but that's just me. Also, I don't like shipping Zod. It's a little heavy for my opinion. But the one I will plug because I really like the dude who makes this and just like what he's doing is Conform. Actually uses Zod. So now that I say that, I'm even realizing it, but this is like a really cool one because it's like he's super focused on progressively enhanced like form validation. So he's about to release V1. I don't think he has yet. But anyway, this is supposed to be like a really nice library. I haven't used it myself, but I've heard enough people say it with confidence. But I will say, like, if you're going to roll it your own, I would start with Node assert because that's just built in, and just do server side. And then if you really want to get fancy, yeah, you can use Zod. And if you really, really want to get fancy, you can use like React hook form, but you're including a lot of extra stuff that I don't actually think is giving you fully what you think it is. And really, your server should be validated first before you even think about trying to validate on the client. And I think most people, again, something I was taught, was you just think about the client first, because I didn't have a server. I didn't know what a server was. Yeah, those are my opinions. But yeah, all that stuff is good. And React hook form works too.
I was going to add, there's a library called Lybrand that is like a very small and optimized, like for code splitting. Oh, it starts VALIBO.
Oh, Validate. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
and it's so this could be if you want to ship less JavaScript to the client. It's
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to check this one out. Thanks. Okay, cool. Yeah, schema. Nice.
If you did want to use that, you just love it. And you said it's heavy. If you're only using it to validate a form inside of the action, so the action receives,
Yeah.
and you only use the Zod package inside of that action.
Yeah.
Is it being shipped to the client?
With 99.9% certainty, no. I always am a little nervous just in general, but yeah, if something's just using the action, we do like bundle shake it and get it out. So yes, you're right. I just am always nervous about saying that with 100% certainty because just compilers do crazy things sometimes, But yes, yeah, if you just use sorry, to really answer your question, yes, if it's just in the action, you're not shipping it to the client, and then the qualm that I had is completely gone. Yeah.
One of the questions I've been sitting on for a long time, back in the very beginning, when we just had the index route. You mentioned that the loader and action, those are always running server.
Always server side. Yep.
And then we had our actual React component.
Yep.
And you said that was, you were talking about harking back to the PHP days, and I was just going to ship the HTML
Yeah.
the return statement. But let's say you have a use effect.
Yeah.
That use effect is clearly running on the client.
Yep.
So in one file, you've got your server code in the loader, you might have server code in action,
Yep.
and then you kind of got like, okay, I'm just going to serve this HTML back as the component, but then I am going to run some client-side code.
Yeah.
To affect the user role.
Yeah. So the default function that you export is like, what's it? In like Avatar, that last airbender, he can be in like the spirit world, right? It's the both. It lives in both. So that one you should always assume this is going to the client. But you're right that loader and action are never going to the client. That is true.
Is there a file structure pattern for moving those server pieces out into a separate file for my like peace of mind to know?
Yeah. We don't have like a like route.loader kind of thing, but it would just be to do a .server file essentially, which is that's what I did on this one. Yeah, all my mutations created, just do them in there because like really, yeah, you're not running this on the client. So
I mean, have you seen JavaScript nowadays?
Yeah.
Cool ones too.
you never know. So was there another hand? Yeah.
We can talk about this later, but like
That's
form data is both the best part and the worst part about the web and Remix.
That's fair. Yeah.
And specifically like Booleans in form data is
Mhm.
crushing me because
Hmm.
Zod has fancy ways to get around some of that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're handled so non-standard with a checkbox returning on or
Oh,
nothing
yeah.
at all, right?
Yeah.
So, can get your 2 cents now or later, but is there a good way to do that? To handle those Boolean type?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Yeah, that's fair. And honestly, I mean, again, like to that point, it's like, it's also kind of the checkbox. Like you're right, like it's the whole system. So
It seems unstandard.
I would make a function that always handles checkboxes correctly and then just pass it into that. And like, I mean, that's just off the top of my head, but I agree. Like sometimes this stuff is hard. And also like, that's the other thing is like, I did all the happy path stuff, right? Like for this, but like, that's the reality of making websites is like, anytime you're dealing with data, stuff can be hard. And like libraries that just pretend it's not hard aren't actually helpful. So like if a library like Zod actually does create like really good APIs that actually do solve the problem, that's amazing. Use Zod, just go for it. But if you're having a problem, if you're having a library that's just obfuscating the problem, pretending it's not a problem, it didn't really solve anything necessarily, just pretend like it was easier.
They do some coercion stuff.
Okay. And if it's
basically,
if it's right and good, that's great. Yeah. I mean, if it does the transforming correctly, then and you like that and your team's bought into it, then just keep using that. It's good. Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for listening.
Amazing. I have not used Remix before. I'm excited to dive in. Thank you all for the questions. If you're interested in hanging out more, we're going to head down the street, down to 6, take a right, count down a couple blocks to Lazarus. Thank you again.